Your brother needs that house more than you do, and if you don't sign it over by Friday, we'll see you in court." My father's voice crackled through the speakerphone while my lawyer, Katherine Morse, covered her mouth to muffle her laughter. The legal threat that was supposed to terrify me into submission had just become the key to my freedom, and the beginning of their complete downfall. Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. I'm 34 years old, and I discovered that sometimes the best way to win a war is to let your enemies fire the first shot. Katherine composed herself, straightening her navy blazer as she leaned toward the phone. "Mr. Hartley, this is Katherine Morse, Natalie's attorney. I must advise you that this call is being recorded, and your threat of litigation has been noted. On what legal grounds exactly do you plan to sue your daughter for her own property?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then my mother's voice, shrill and defensive. "She knows what she owes us. We raised her, "I'm going to stop you right there," Katherine interrupted, her voice smooth as silk over steel. "Raising a child is a legal obligation, not a debt to be collected. Please proceed with your lawsuit. I haven't had this much entertainment in years." The call ended with my father's sputtered curses. Katherine turned to me, her expression shifting from amused to serious. "They're going to regret this, Natalie. But are you prepared for what comes next?" I looked around my living room. The exposed brick walls I'd restored myself, the original hardwood floors I'd salvaged, the bay windows overlooking the garden I'd cultivated from dirt and neglect. This 1920s craftsman hadn't just been a house when I bought it 5 years ago. It had been a wreck, a teardown, everyone said, except I saw potential. Just like I'd seen potential in myself, despite my family's best efforts to convince me otherwise. "I've been preparing for this my whole life," I said. "I just didn't know it. The house had cost me everything, my savings, my sleep, my social life. I'd spent weekends stripping wallpaper, nights learning plumbing from YouTube, holidays alone because family gatherings always turned into lectures about how I was wasting my life on a money pit, while my brother Oscar needed help. Always Oscar. The golden child who'd dropped out of 3 colleges, wrecked 2 cars, and burned through every loan my parents gave him. The same brother who'd sneered at my fixer-upper until a realtor friend mentioned the neighborhood was gentrifying and property values had tripled. That's when my house became family property. That's when I became selfish for living in it alone. "Let's review what we have," Katherine said, opening her laptop. "The deed is solely in your name, correct? Purchased with my own money, no co-signers, no family loans. And these improvements you mentioned?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through 5 years of transformation photos. Everything documented. Every receipt saved. I turned a $140,000 teardown into a $500,000 home with my own hands and money. Katherine's eyes gleamed. "And your parents' contribution?" "They told me I was an idiot. Mom said I'd die alone in my money pit. Dad offered to introduce me to a nice apartment complex instead." "Perfect." She typed rapidly. "Now, tell me about this trust fund situation you mentioned on the phone." This was where it got interesting, where my parents' greed had finally exposed their greatest secret. My grandmother, my dad's mother, left trust funds for both Oscar and me. Equal amounts. We were supposed to get access at 25. I pulled out a folder I'd been carrying for weeks. I never got mine. They told me Grandma changed her mind before she died, that she was disappointed in my life choices and removed me from the will. But last month, Oscar got drunk at his engagement party. Started bragging about how he'd burned through his trust fund already and needed my house to maintain his lifestyle for his new wife. When I asked what trust fund, he laughed and said, "The same one you got, stupid." "Oh wait," I mimicked his cruel laugh. "Mom and Dad said you pissed yours away on that dump. Guess that's why you're so bitter." Katherine stopped typing. "He said you got your trust fund. That's what made me start digging. I hired a private investigator, pulled records, found my grandmother's real will. I handed her the documents. Oscar and I each inherited $200,000. The funds were distributed 5 years ago, when I turned 25. But you never saw a penny. My parents had themselves listed as trustees. They had the power to distribute the funds, and they did, to themselves. They told me I was disinherited while they stole my money to fund Oscar's lifestyle." Katherine's laughter from earlier was gone. Her face was stone. "This is fraud. Criminal fraud. And now they're threatening to sue you for a house you bought with your own money while they stole your inheritance." "That's not even the best part," I said. The investigator found more. "My parents have been claiming me as a dependent on their taxes for the past 5 years. while I was fully employed and supporting myself. They've been collecting credits and deductions using my information. Tax fraud on top of inheritance theft. Katherine shook her head. They really thought you'd never find out? They thought I was the same scared kid who believed them when they said I was worthless. The same daughter who accepted crumbs and called it love. The truth was, I might have stayed that person if they hadn't gotten greedy. If they'd been satisfied with stealing my inheritance, I'd have never known. But threatening to sue me for my house, my blood, sweat, and tears house, had triggered something primal. So, Katherine said, closing her laptop with a decisive click, here's what we're going to do. We're going to let them file their frivolous lawsuit. In discovery, we'll request financial records that will expose everything. Then we'll countersue for the stolen trust fund, file criminal complaints for fraud, and report the tax situation to the IRS. What about Oscar? He didn't know about the theft. Ignorance isn't innocence. He benefited from stolen money and participated in trying to take your house. He's an adult who made choices. 3 days later, my parents made good on their threat. I was served at work in front of colleagues because of course they wanted to humiliate me. The lawsuit claimed I had promised the house to Oscar, that I was holding family property hostage and sought immediate transfer of the deed. Katherine's response was swift and brutal. Our countersuit laid out everything. The stolen inheritance, the tax fraud, the attempt to steal property purchased with legitimate funds. We didn't just defend, we declared war. The family group chat exploded within hours. Aunt Linda, Natalie, how could you sue your own parents? Uncle Ray, asterisk, this is disgusting. Family doesn't do this, asterisk. Cousin Marcus, always knew you were selfish. I typed one response. Asterisk, they stole $200,000 from me. The evidence is filed with the court. Public record. Look it up, asterisk. Then I left the chat. But the real showdown came at what would be our last family dinner, 2 weeks after the lawsuits were filed. My mother had summoned everyone to their house. The house I now realized my inheritance had probably helped pay for. I arrived with Katherine and my investigator, Marcus Chin. The dining room was packed with relatives, all ready to stage an intervention. My parents sat at the head of the table like martyred saints. Natalie's here, someone whispered, and the room fell silent. You came, my mother said, tears already starting. I knew you still had some family loyalty. I came to give you one chance, I said, not sitting down. Drop the lawsuit, return my inheritance with interest, and amend your fraudulent tax returns. Do it within 48 hours, and I'll consider not pressing criminal charges. How dare you, my father started. How dare I? I laughed, but it was sharp, bitter. How dare I what? Discover you stole my inheritance? Find out you've been committing tax fraud? Refuse to hand over my house to your deadbeat son? Oscar stood up, face red. I'm not a deadbeat. I need that house. Why? I asked. Because you burned through $200,000 plus whatever mom and dad stole from me? Because your fiancé thinks you're rich and you can't admit you're broke. His fiancée, a pretty blonde named Tiffany, went pale. What? Oscar, what is she talking about? Marcus stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. Financial records, he said simply. Mr. and Mrs. Hartley received $200,000 from Eleanor Hartley's trust intended for Natalie. The money was dispersed over 5 years into various accounts, including several in Oscar's name. The room erupted. Relatives grabbed for the papers, voices rising in shock and anger. But not at my parents, at me. You ungrateful. Family business should stay. How could you embarrass? Enough! I slammed my hand on the table. You want to talk about family? Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't threaten to sue for property they have no right to. You all sat here ready to guilt me into giving up my house. But where were you when they stole my inheritance? Where were you when they told me I was disinherited and worthless? Silence. That's what I thought. I looked at my parents, really looked at them. My mother's tears had stopped, replaced by cold calculation. My father's righteous anger had morphed into fear. You have 48 hours. Drop the lawsuit, return the money, or face the consequences. We don't have it, my mother whispered. The money, it's gone. Then you better find it, Katherine said. Sell assets, take out loans, figure it out. Because the alternative is federal prison for tax fraud and state prison for inheritance theft. We left them there, surrounded by relatives who were slowly realizing they'd been defending criminals. The family that had always preached loyalty and sacrifice had been built on lies and theft. Tiffany broke up with Oscar that night. She sent me a message. Thank you for exposing the truth. He told me his trust fund was in property investments. I almost married a fraud. My parents dropped their lawsuit within 24 hours. They hired their own lawyer who tried to negotiate, but Katherine was a shark who smelled blood. We accepted a payment plan for the stolen inheritance plus interest, required them to file amended tax returns, and got a legal agreement that they would never contact me again. The IRS penalties alone nearly bankrupted them. They had to sell their house, the one partially paid for with my money. Oscar moved back in with them, his engagement ruined, his reputation destroyed. The golden child tarnished beyond repair. But the sweetest justice came 6 months later. I was sitting in my garden, the one they'd mocked, when a certified letter arrived. It was from my grandmother's estate lawyer, who'd been tracking me down after seeing the lawsuit in public records. It turned out my grandmother had left me something else, something my parents couldn't touch. Her personal journals and a small separate account they'd never known about. In her journal, dated a month before she died, she'd written, "Asterisk, I fear David and Marie will try to keep Natalie from her inheritance. They've always resented her independence, her strength. If you're reading this, dear one, know that I saw who you really were. The house you'll build with your own hands will be worth more than any money I could leave you. But take what's yours and build your life free from their shadow." Asterisk. She'd known. Somehow she'd known. The small account had grown over the years to nearly $50,000. I used it to pay off the last of my renovation loans and install the greenhouse I'd always dreamed of. Katherine laughed when I told her about the letter. "Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman." She was. I just wish she'd lived to see this. "She did," Katherine said. "Through you. You became exactly who she knew you could be. Someone who builds rather than tears down, who creates rather than takes. My house stands now as more than just property. It's proof that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep. That sometimes their rejection is just redirection towards something better. The relatives who sided with my parents faded away. Good riddance to bad blood. But others reached out, apologizing, sharing their own stories of my parents' manipulations over the years. I built new relationships with cousins who'd been pushed away, aunts who'd been labeled difficult for asking questions. Oscar still sends occasional messages begging for help. I don't respond. My parents live in a small apartment now, their golden years tarnished by their own greed. They thought they could sue me into submission, thought the threat of legal action would make me crumble like I had as a child. Instead, their threat became my liberation. Katherine was right to laugh. It was laughable, the idea that the people who'd stolen from me could use the law as a weapon. The law became my sword instead, cutting through years of lies to reveal the truth beneath. My name is Natalie Hartley, and I own my house free and clear. Not just the deed, but every brick, every board, every flower in the garden. I built it with hands they called worthless, with money they said I didn't deserve, with dreams they tried to steal. And when they threatened to take it all away, I didn't just keep my house. I brought theirs down around them. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well. It's living honestly, openly, with nothing left to hide and nothing left to fear. My parents taught me that family was about sacrifice and loyalty. They were right. I sacrificed my silence and stayed loyal to the truth. And that, more than any lawsuit, is what finally set me free.